Smile. To the process. We'll be right back. Hey guys, welcome to the process on this Wednesday. And here's my co-host. What's your name again, sir?
Jesse Lopez. What's going on? What's going on?
Who doesn't know Jesse Lopez? And what's the name of your? I don't want to call it a show.
Yeah, they the show. Yeah, it's not official. It's my little spinoff, my little videos, educational, controversial, whatever you want to call it. Stir that pot.
Stir that pot. Yep. This we're gonna stir the pot tonight because tonight's episode is on challenging M.E.C. Is it best practice or is it a poor standard of care? So let's get into it. So welcome, Jesse. Welcome to the show, man. It's been a while. Hope everything is good.
Yeah. Busy, but everything's great.
Round of applause, show appreciation. So we get into M.E.C. So what is M.E.C, Jesse? What's M.E.C? Let's let the people know. For those people who are not sterile processing nerds, who are not M.E.C, what's that?
M.E.C, well, M.E.C is always tied into our high-level disinfectants. So M.E.C stands for minimum effective concentration. The old terminology used to be M.R.C, which is minimum recommended concentration. But terminology changes. We're always playing with terminology in this field for some reason or another, for the better or for the worse, whichever you want to say. But we now associate our high-level disinfectants with M.E.Cs, or minimum effective concentrations.
So what's the difference? Okay, let me ask you. This is not reals, guys. We're just going back and forth. So why would you think they would change from MRC to M.E.C?
Well, and I thought about that for a while, and honestly, I think they changed it because there can be so much interpretation when you have a recommended concentration. Like what you might recommend as a manufacturer may be different from what somebody else recommends as a manufacturer. And I associate that with like how we sterilize our instruments. A manufacturer of a mosquito hemostat and a different manufacturer of a mosquito hemostat have different parameters for sterilization because it's their recommendation. But if we have an effective concentration, we're all killing the same amount. We're trying to battle the same microorganisms. So we're speaking directly of the chemical used, what's its effect, not what is recommended. That's my theory on it.
So if we look at it literally, M.E.C, minimum effective concentration. That means the lowest effective concentration. Or there's another term called LEC, which is, I think, lowest effective concentration. I think that's actually a term in the medical circles. So
yes.
So you basically they're saying anything below that is not effective, can't do the job.
Correct.
Or is it literal or is it not literal?
Well, son, that's where I want to stir that pot in, because how do you guarantee that there's no moisture whatsoever? To me, when you think about something minimal, is
Mhm.
that any change in that concentration, as little as it can be, would be ineffective in its use. So any introduction of moisture, any introduction of bioburden, of anything would render that solution ineffective. But then you have to think about the quantity that you use. That minimum effective concentration changes. I mean, if we have a 10-gallon tub of solution and we add 3 drops of water, is that going to change the minimum effective concentration compared to a gallon of water and you introduced maybe a cup of water? That's a big difference when you talk about volume. So it can get confusing depending on the volume that you're using. So
So,
I don't think it's a literal, I don't think it's a literal term. It's more of a safeguard term.
and there's also another term called MSC, because I was doing a little research because I was like, Jesse coming on, I need to be on my P's and Q's. So so there is a maximum safe concentration. So in a way, I
Mm,
was looking at those acronyms, and I was thinking maybe MSC should be used instead of MEC.
I
Because
and I think I agree with that. I will agree with you on that one, and I hope we elaborate a little bit more on that one as well.
yeah, so the maximum safe, you could put a couple instruments in that water if you're doing hand wash. You could have a little, splashing, a little spilling, add a little extra moisture to it, and still be in that safe zone. But if you
Yes.
say MEC, as soon as you add something to it, it's not MEC. it's not. It's not the minimum. It's below the minimum at that point. Correct.
Exactly, exactly, and that's where I kind of spinned off with this is when we always talk about most of our standards, our regulations, chemicals. We're always talking, even our parameters for sterilization. We always talk about the minimum. What is the this is the minimum that we can do, but we're never given a maximum or a safe margin. Why is that? Why can't we have that maximum margin so we know where our margin for error is at? Because if you're always working on a minimum, you're always, to me, you're always on pins and needles, right? You're always thinking, oh, I got to do this perfect every single time, because if it doesn't, and yeah, there shouldn't be no, when it comes to safety, there shouldn't be no margin of error, but our regulations are geared to the minimum safety and quality of standard, not the maximum. So why can't we exceed it?
And to me, that's a little. We on a kind of a precipice. If we go below 4 minutes, like 1 second, it's not acceptable. If we go below 270, 269, it's not acceptable. So why can't there be an acceptable safe zone where we could go either a little higher or a little lower? Or is there, and is it not stated in our policies and procedures and best practices? Is there a safe zone? So can I basically there kind of is a safe zone, because you could go to 5 minutes, you could go to 6 minutes for some instruments, but we operate at 4 minutes for the majority of our instruments in most places.
Yeah.
Some places do 10 minutes, 7 minutes, etc., etc., etc. But
And, and
what?
and that's a citation from the Joint Commission. If you go above that 4 minutes, they want to see in writing where they says, can
Right.
you exceed it? But very little IFUs. I've seen a couple,
Mhm.
very few IFUs tell you minimum 4 minutes and give you a maximum. Now they'll give you options, like they'll give you a parameter that's 270, 4 minutes, and then for CJD instruments, you can do 275 at 18 minutes. Well, there's my range right now. If it's not going to
Mhm.
damage my instruments at 275, 18, what's 270 with 5 minutes going to do? It's not going
True,
to do
true,
anything
true.
different, but the Joint Commission will look at that as a citation. And it should be like that. Our chemicals, when we dose our chemicals, you get a range on there. Whatever chemical you're using, an eighth of an ounce per gallon to an ounce per gallon. Where do you set that at? Do you set it at the maximum? To me, I say set it at the maximum, because if your instruments aren't getting clean, then you know that the chemistry is wrong. Why
to
dose it at the lowest and then keep trying to play to get to that good part of it? Get it at the maximum. And if it's ineffective, then you know it's not the concentration, it's the chemistry itself.
yes,
You
because
know, and I think it,
if there were, I agree with you, and I don't know, I shouldn't be agreeing with you because this is not.
come on, man. Come
So
on, man.
so yeah, because if you look at it, if you have a sink and sinks vary in size, if you spread in that solution over of a wider area, shouldn't you be using a different concentration versus if you're using that sink in a smaller tube or tub or basin like area? Shouldn't
well,
you?
when you think about fluids and the dynamics of science, it doesn't really matter because of dispersal. You can put 10 gallons in a big bucket and 10 gallons in a tube, and what 10 gallons in a tube look like, you'll be like, well, that's not enough water. But if you increase the area, it looks like there's more space. It's still 10 gallons of water. So the concentration will never change. It's just how the chemical disperses into it. So
But you
you would
have to
have to.
look at your cooling time. If your liquid is spread out further, it'll cool faster.
That is
If it's a
correct.
little more
That is
condensed, it'll take a longer time to cool. It's just like your sinks. If your sinks are wider, you may have 10 gallons that might be 5 inches high, or you may have 10 gallons that's 8 inches high. The 5 inch high, the sink is gonna cool faster. So you
all right.
have to look at all these.
We're agreeing too much in this show right now. We gotta change this topic.
We
No,
got
I agree. That is true. That is true. That is scientific fact. There's no difference on there, anything like that. You are absolutely correct on that.
so my MEC could drop faster than your MEC based on my equipment or the
Yep.
configuration of my department. So how do we determine when we're below that standard? And that's a good question. I don't have an answer for it, guys. I'm posing that question. So if anybody's watching, thank you, Marla Roberts for her comment. So yeah, I don't want to comment on the manufacturers too much because I love you guys, but we definitely need to step it up in terms of providing the right formulas for reprocessing.
And it's crazy because it's like if you actually contact a vendor, they'll tell you, oh no, these are based on a minimum, but you're not putting that in your IFU. So it's like, where does that statement come in at? Like, even when you talk about sterilization parameters, is that 274 minutes? That's the minimum parameter that's effective. Well, why aren't you giving us the exceeding? Because there's very few facilities that I've worked in personally that just uses one vendor of instrumentation. There's multiple vendors. And when we create trays, that can cause a problem. I've ran into it several times and still continue to run into it in my career, where I'll get into a tray and I get my hands dirty with it, the assembler, and I look at an instrument and go, this IFU stuck to my head that this parameter on the in sterilization, or even the cleaning parameter, is different than the rest of the instruments. Let me look this up and go, oh, we're clashing. So we need to fix this right now, because if somebody else sees it, it's going to be a problem. But when you contact the manufacturer, be, oh no, that's just the minimum. So I should be already to say I can go with the higher
Right.
parameters and cover it. What is going to become more sterile? I mean, that's crazy. What I'm doing to the instruments, I'm sterilizing it too much. That's
Right.
crazy to me.
But I think that's more on the HLD from an HLD standpoint. Let's say you bring a scope down and there's moisture in the lumen and you put it in you lay down in your sink. That moisture comes out. Or you know, some of those duodenoscopes, they come out a
Mm-hmm.
little gunky. You put that in
Yep.
your sink. Do you have to refill? Do you and I don't know. I'm kind of surprised. Or maybe I know. Do you rinse off your endoscopes like you rinse off your instruments and then put it in an enzymatic bath?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
cool, cool, cool.
So with endoscopes, I mean, you have to do a leak test, and we do a wet leak test. So when we do this wet leak test, the moisture is already on the scope. We don't dry it off before we put it into the enzymatic. So right there, you're introducing more. And that's the majority with most of our instruments. We give it a rinse and then we're putting it into a bath. At what point of doing that? With scopes is a little bit different because scopes, you're supposed to replenish that solution every single time. But when we
True.
talk about instrumentation, how many sets do you put into that sink? And if you're using the lowest concentration of detergent, at what point is that detergent no longer effective? How much moisture does it take?
True. How
Right? I
much
don't
is it?
know.
And is your the MEC doesn't factor the length of the lumens within the scope either. So you could have a scope with lumens filled with liquid, and that's probably like a couple ounces right there, and that brings down your MEC real quick.
Yeah,
You know. So how do we
exactly.
factor that? Those guys on
Exactly.
Amy, can you check this out? Because I know some of y'all watching. Can you factor that in the next time you you put those standards in? Because I
And
really want to know, or have some clarification on that.
yeah, and again, like I stated, MEC is usually when we think about MEC, we always think about high level disinfectant. But MEC applies to any chemistry that we use. And if we're dosing at the minimum effective concentration of any detergent, whether it's through the cart washer, whether it's through the washer, the ultrasonic, how much moisture can be introduced into there before it's ineffective? What is that ratio? I mean, I know we talk about gallons to ounces, but
Hmm.
if you're only putting an ounce of detergent into a 10-gallon bucket, that and it gives you a concentration, then what happens when you fill at 11
Right,
gallons? It
right.
only takes 16 ounces. Think about it. If there's 16, if there's an ounce in an instrument, 16 instruments gives you another gallon of water. So what happens there, right? It changes that. So
And
or another
who?
cup. I'm sorry, another cup.
Okay, who doses their sink with water?
What do you mean? Dosing? What do you? Who's dosing the sinks?
With water. You open the tap and you look at the line and then you shut it off. So
Right.
if you put if you're gonna dose by 10 gallons, oh, I just went a little over the line. What do you do? It's
Well,
an eye gauge basically.
yeah, I mean, if you have your automatic dosers, okay, so that's
Right.
going to set off whatever you're putting in there, whether it be 2.5 ounces per 10 gallons of water, whatever that ounce is. But again, it's eyed out. It's not like you're looking at the
Yeah, it
bubble
is
there,
it's
you know.
exactly 10 gallons. Let me shut the tap. No, you eyeing it. Oh, that it's at the line. Let me shut it off.
It
But
is,
like
it
you could
is.
go over like a 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and that's a couple ounces of water right there.
Yeah, yeah. And again, and I mean, let's be real with this one as well. A lot of times when you have that range of an eighth of an ounce to an ounce, most people go with that middle margin. They go with that half ounce per gallon to kind of play into both sides. But
Right.
again, if it's not effectively cleaning your instruments or there's an issue, that has to be adjusted either way because too much solution is just as bad as less too little solution. So there's always a play on that. More is not always better, and sometimes least gives you the better effect. But that is that margin. How much do we go until we do not become effective anymore?
And shout out to Dante. Yeah, and I definitely believe in terms of what Dante just said, having multiple detergents and detergent manufacturers or different chemicals in your sink. But to your point, how do you know? Do you? That's another way to recommend. Boy, I'm thinking of like three different things that kind of overlap. So, do you believe in cleaning one case cat per sink, or do you believe in cleaning one tray per sink?
One tray per sink. We have a 3 sink setup. This is my setup with the 3 sink setup. The first sink is the rinse. The second sink is your soaking cleaning. Your third one is your treated water. You clean one tray at a time.
Are
Don't
you are you dumping the water after that?
No, we determine what the usages are. So if the trays come down heavily soiled, as in like orthos and neural, yes. But basic trays and L&D, because L&D always comes down heavily soiled. So that's when we're dumping. But we determine it by use. We look at the temperature. If the temperature drops, we change it. If it looks like there's a little floaties in there and little gunks in there, we drop it. If we start seeing that, after a certain amount of time that we see that that water starts getting a little murky, then we drop it. But yeah, it's not every single time.
Okay. I've heard some recommendations for that. That's why I was just wondering because it's getting
Man,
a little more focused onto every tray, every time type of situation. So I'm just wondering because hand wash, if you have a camera set, do you switch out that camera set every time in that enzymatic solution? If you use that, no, you probably don't, right? You
no,
probably
no.
wash a few cameras in that same solution. How do you know it's still effective?
Yeah, exactly. And it's I've been trying. I've come from the food industry, and in the food industry, any chemistry that you use, we have a titration kit. We have to test that on a daily or weekly basis to make sure that whatever you're dosing out is effective. And it tells you 500 parts per million, 700 parts per million, and that's what you're doing. Why don't we have anything like that for the medical field? That we can put in just like we do with our high level disinfectant. We do our M.E.C strips in there and it tells you
Hmm.
pass or fail. Why don't we have that for our detergents so that we know? How do you know? Some of them detergents are clear. Did somebody dose it? Did they not dose it? You don't know. You don't know.
So,
You might be cleaning and it's crazy because I have students and my
mhm.
students were cleaning one day and I'm looking and I go and I look at the water and like I've gotten used to like putting my
Yeah,
glove in there and doing a
right,
feel and I'm
right,
like,
right. I know
"Ugh,"
what you
and
mean.
I'm like, did you dose? Yeah, we dosed it. I'm like, "Ugh,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
it's so
sure.
clean.
It's not
It's so
feeling
clean
right.
these days. Like from a certain manufacturer. Like now, there are certain manufacturers with colored enzymatics, so you can actually
Yep.
see the water change color. But there are some different manufacturers that when you dose, you don't see anything.
You
You know,
there?
it
Yeah.
may be a little more foggy, a little more foggy than it was before, but you know.
Yeah, and it's again, and there's always pros and cons to those colors because it's hard enough to brush under the surface of water and clear water. So now you have, colored water. You can't tell if that's soil or what's under there. So now you have to come up, look at it, go back down. So there's pros and cons to that. But yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of the colored enzymatic. I like the color enzymatics because I know for sure that water turned pink or that water turned purple, whatever that
Right.
color changed, I know that that's been dosed in there.
And then we have I don't wanna add endings to words. I don't want to make up anything. So there were low foaming enzymatics before. Now they even more low foaming. So like you'll still get a couple bubbles if you splash it,
Oh
but
yeah,
now some of the
definitely.
enzymatics, you open a tap of water and you won't see that many bubbles at all. So it's like you don't really know from a site standpoint or from a filling standpoint if it has the enzymatic in there. So you just have
And
to trust. Sometimes I don't even remember if I dose because the
yeah,
water
and
is
that,
too
and,
clear.
that-
I'm
and
like,
that's
let
the
me try and feel. Like I think I did. Let me smell it. I think I did. you know.
yeah, and
So
that's the thing. So like I mean, when I teach people to fill up a sink, is I tell people fill the sink up with water and then dose afterwards. Because if you dose first and then put the water in there, it's gonna foam too much. But
mhm.
maybe that's a good thing. Now we know that we really dosed in there.
Exactly. That's why I sometimes think like that too. Like I may not dose at the end, but I'll dose close to the end. So I see a few bubbles. So I know when I get back to that sink, because let's face it, Dick and Tam, you have to load washers, empty those pans, organize the department, racks,
Yep.
organize my music, and get to that sink. Right.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, yeah, guys, I do get my playlist straight before I start. All
That's
right.
right. That's
So
right. Got to. When you're in decon, that playlist got to be hitting.
yep, yep. So
Definitely.
yeah, so we in Dick and Tam. So we talking about it. So what? Let's move on to washers. So how do we test, or do we test the washers to make sure, like our regular washer test, to make sure our dosing is right, or do we do that on our PMs, making sure our dosing is correct for our
Oh,
washer?
that's another one. Another one for me. And I just hit on it with that with the testing. Our testing shows when we do our washer test with our soil testing on there, we're making sure that, those spray arms are working and that it's
Mm-hmm.
dosing properly. And depending on the test, some tests are really difficult to pass. Some are pretty easy. You can run it underwater and they'll pass with no problem at all. I can tell you right now that I was using one test and running it in one of my washers and it was passing and I wasn't even dosing chemicals. you know. And when we were setting it up, I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, and I'm looking, I'm like, where's our chemicals at? And he goes, oh, we haven't hooked that up yet. And I'm like,
Oh
well,
my goodness.
how am I passing my test? Like, this is crazy. So I wound up going to a more stringent test, which
Right.
showed me, but there's no way to know if you're titrating correctly until a, facilities person or a vendor comes in or the manufacturer and they do the titration for it. There's no way for the user to be able to do that on their own to know that you're dosing your chemical aside from seeing, okay, my line is moving on my barrel. I'm marking it today. I'm going to date it. Where's it
Right.
going to be at tomorrow? But is that the right concentration that you're dosing? You don't know.
And you can't tell on the clean side unless you have maybe a ADP, or ATP test or something. You might know if it passes. Then do you think you're okay now? Like there's nothing that tells you, hey, and then maybe that's an idea for one of those manufacturers to have actually a reading on the dosing. The same way you have a reading on your sterilizer, have a reading on your dosing for each.
Yeah,
I think some machines, just the older machines had that, but the newer ones, not so much with the printout. So I think that would be a good idea. But not to put it on the washer, but put it in that dosing in that enzymatic room so
yeah,
that it's
yeah,
coming from that because if you ever been in those enzymatic rooms, you get the little spinners that
yeah.
pull
The
the
little spinners.
enzymatic,
Yeah, yeah,
so you could tell what's actually coming out from that standpoint, not actually what's going on with the washer. Because it could be spinning, you could be getting air coming through there, and the
yeah.
washer would. I've seen it. I'm telling
Yeah,
you,
yeah, yeah, yep.
I've
It,
seen
it
it.
it happens. It happens, and there are some titrators out there that does allow the in the pump rooms does allow the users to titrate chemistry to see how many ounces is being
Okay.
titrated out. But again, once it goes into the washer, there can be a break in a line somewhere. There can be a little pinhole in that line because, and depending how far is your pump room to your
Yes.
washers, that's a big difference as well. So, and those lines when they sit for a while,
Mm-hmm.
there's some buildup that happens in there and some plaque that builds up in those hoses. It's a lot of different factors that come into play.
True, true, true. The size of the hose too. So if you're dosing from a 1 inch hose and then you go down to a 1 centimeter hose, are you getting the same dose? I mean, man, that's not for me to. I'm trying to figure out.
That's
you
a
know,
whole different ballgame. Yeah,
that's a
yeah, that's
whole
a whole
that's a whole different ball game. Are you getting what are you getting what came out the pump into the washer, or is it just to the washer and you get maybe a little bit less than that? I don't
Yeah,
know,
I mean, and
but
some people may debate that function, but if you think about construction wise with steam pipes, if you
hmm
don't have the right steam line in there, that's the right diameter steam line, it throws your whole sterilizer, washer, the whole mechanics is thrown off completely. And that's a vapor. So think about a viscous solution through a smaller hose. It's it coats that hose, so you lose some concentration. So yes, definitely that plays a big factor.
yeah, yeah. And I think okay, so let's get back to the sink. Let's get back to the sink. So we had the sink. All right, let me give me some competencies. So I'm at my sink. I'm dosing. When do I change my enzymatic? When do
Well,
I know as a technician? When do I know when to change my enzymatic?
hey, first you have to figure out what your policies and procedures is defining a use, because the standards tell us that it should be changed per use, but the facility determines what a use is. So that can be every 10 trays. That can be, if it's heavy soil trays, it can be every 5 ortho trays. If it's loaners, because you don't know where it's going, it can be every single time. For scopes, flexible scopes, it's well defined that it's every single scope. After every scope, that detergent has to be changed. So depending on the usage, some facilities leave it up to the technician. You know, when the temperature drops, is there visible soil in there? Um, it was the tray heavily soiled. So all those factors come into play. So it's what your policies are written, defining what a use is for that sink.
Yeah, I agree, brother. I agree. And if you're in Dick and Tam, guys, and you're not sure, you always have your backup, your supervisor, your lead, your manager, and also your competencies, policies, procedures, SOPs. Definitely should be able to tell you that.
And
So
and definitely with with your chemistry, it's important. I preach about this all the time, and people would just look at me, and I'm like, okay, again, my food background, it's when we learn chemistry, time, temperature, concentration, and contact. Those are the 4 points that you have to have with all your chemistry. So you have to monitor that temperature. That chemistry is not going to be like, you don't take, some people like taking cold showers, but you don't wash dishes in cold water. You don't. You know, it's not going to be, that's not an effective temperature for the chemistry to do its work. Too much heat is a bad thing, but you have to have that right temperature. And that works in hand with the concentration and the full contact of the instrumentation. You can't just submerge half the instrument and think that you can get it clean just as effective. It has to submerge completely.
and to segue, talking about washing. So there's a shoe that can help you comfortably step away from decontamination, right? We know you spend your entire shift on your feet and need a healthy shoe that can easily be decontaminated. All Cal Zero shoes are designed to keep you moving and are completely machine and dishwasher safe, right? You can also wash with bleach. Cal Zero is a type of footwear that meets the changing needs of the medical environment using an innovative copolymer rubber compound to create a product that is sterilizable, autoclavable, and anti-static, and extremely comfortable for people standing for long hours. So, additionally, Cal Zero Classics can be sterilized using an autoclave at at your facility or in your sterile processing department. So Cal Zero's been in business since 1983, guys. So they're here to help you step away from the worries of not having comfortable shoes. Calzero's mission is to provide comfortable, easy to clean footwear made to treat your feet. So go out, guys, get your Calzero shoes. And the process also has a 70.99 discount coupon code. So when you go get when you get your shoes, you will be able to get a nice little discount on them for your sterile processing week, which is coming up in about 3 or 4 weeks. So check out calzero.com, guys. All right, let's get
Awesome.
back to Deacon Town.
Yes. With your casual shoes on.
Yeah. And put your calzeros on. Also put your shoe covers, guys. But
Yes,
these
yes,
shoes are
definitely.
definitely real comfortable. So check them out.
Cool.
So so we're in Deacon Town. I load my stuff. I'm washing. I'm cleaning. I go to lunch. I come back. Am I changing my water or am I keeping it the same? Depending on what I'm doing. I'm doing hand wash. Should I change my cold water in hand wash or should I keep it?
Oh, sir, before you went to lunch, you should have emptied that sink. Do not leave that sink when
Oh,
you go to lunch. That sink
oh,
needs no items left soaking, no water in that sink left because you don't know. First off, over soaking your instruments. Some IFUs will tell you do not soak longer than 20 minutes, and we know breaks are usually 30, 1 hour long, whatever that may be. And again, that water temperature can change. You don't know if somebody dosed anything. You know, not that anybody's going to try to set you up or anything in install process, and we all watch each other's back, right? So
right,
making
right.
sure nobody,
100%.
put anything in there, nobody mix no chemicals. So before you go to lunch, before you go to break, make sure you empty your sinks, and when you come back, start with a fresh sink.
Start with a fresh sink. Also for my instrument sink, right?
Yep,
All
yep,
right. All right. All
yep.
right. So I'm coming back. I'm doing the same thing I did before. correct? Now, if my bottle runs out or if my enzymatic detergent runs out, how do I go about changing that? What do I look for when getting a new bottle?
Well, you're always with your chemistry. Of course, you're going to make sure that you're using the correct chemistry. Some facilities use very different chemistries. The ones that the chemistry you use for hand wash may not be the same that you use for your washers and your ultrasonic. May be a completely different chemistry. Also, depending on the IFU on the instrumentation, are you using a neutral, whatever detergent you're using, whether it be alkaline, neutral, is it
Yeah.
enzymatic? Does it have an enzymatic in it, or is it just a neutral detergent? Make sure you're swapping out for the same chemistry that you're using, and make sure that chemistry is not expired.
Man, make sure it's not expired. And also, guys, when your trays come down pre-treated with that solution on it, you want to make sure you wash that off.
Man,
You
thank you. Yo, why I cannot get anybody to agree with me on that one. They believe for some reason, I don't know why, they believe that because it's an enzymatic and you're introducing it to an enzymatic, you're okay. Mixing chemicals is not okay, no matter who or what the manufacturers are, unless it states it on that IFU that you can, it's compatible. All chemistry should be rinsed off before introducing into your wash sink.
Yeah, and I would recommend if you're gonna mix a chemical from the same manufacturer, so you know kind of like it's more compatible through manufacturers. Because I know manufacturers fight all the time. They change
Yeah.
their chemistry just a little bit to upset the other guy. so
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
so yeah, so use it from find out if you use the same manufacturer for your sinks, for your washers, for your hand wash, and for your scopes, etc. Just check to see if you could cross, use them through all processes
Yeah.
in terms of deeping, soaking, rinsing, washing. So just to be on the safe side, I would
I
just
see.
go and start using because people like I've seen so many burns in cell processing, it's ridiculous. So you do not want to get one of those serious burns. Thanks, Dante. Um, First thing to rinse off, you want to rinse off and a lot of people get this wrong. Your water temperature for your rinsing is cool. Your water temperature for your soaking is hot. Am I correct?
That is correct. That is
Some
correct. Cool
people
water
put
rinse.
hot water in all sinks.
Yep. Well, I mean, I've gone into facilities where the first sink is your soaking sink right off the back, and then you're rinsing and then rinsing again. So there
Mm,
is no initial rinse. It's an automatic soaking, then rinsing, and then another rinse right afterwards.
mm,
So I don't know where they get that order from, or where they get that interpretation, with anything, with either our training manual or our standards. But that first sink in their eyes is a automatic detergent soak right off the back.
mm. So okay, so I have a question. Now I haven't heard anyone speak about this. I think this will be the first time that somebody actually speaking about this on one of these platforms. So you rinse, do you separate after rinsing? Do you soak then separate? How do you manage that?
Well, the process that I follow is you sort before you rinse. Okay, so it's you're taking your instruments out of your basket,
Mm-hmm.
and you rinse your basket off. You place your basket off to the side, next to the sink that you're about to soak into, and your instruments get a initial rinse, and then you're sorting it off into your basket. So your instruments should be basically handled right off, almost like you're doing this assembly. You're grabbing your instruments, opening them up, rinsing them, and organizing them into your basket.
I've seen a bunch of different ways. That's interesting. I've seen a
Yeah,
couple of
yep.
different
I've
ways.
seen I've seen it done a bunch of different ways too. I mean, I've seen individuals that just grab the basket as is and give it a rinse and
Yeah.
then try to
Mm-hmm.
sort through it again. I've seen individuals sort the basket all nice and neat and then give it a rinse and then
Mm-hmm.
try to soak it. The process that I teach is that you take all your instruments out, you rinse your basket, by itself, because you need to examine that for any gross soil, any leftover suture in there. Indicators might be in there, pieces that might have broke off. So you're going to rinse your basket off, put it off to the side, and then rinse your individual instruments. Whether you're grouping them or whatever you're doing is to remove that visible gross soil and then organize it into your basket before
So
soaking.
guys, anybody out there watching, leave in the comments. Do you rinse, sort, soak? Do you sort, rinse, soak? Do you soak, rinse, sort?
Yeah, all
I think I
kinds of
cover all
combos
three.
there,
That's like,
right?
like 9, right? Three
There's all
times three is
kinds of
9, right?
combos
Yeah,
right
man.
there.
All right, cool.
Then,
So
then that kind of leads into another one. I always talk about this as well. I try to bring this more. The difference between manual cleaning and manual preparation. When I think about manual cleaning, is I'm physically thinking about the actual scrubbing of the instrument. When does that happen? Doing your like, let's say you have a tray with 50 instruments. How do you manually clean that instrument if that's the only process you're gonna do?
I would do that during sorting, so when I'm sorting my instruments.
Okay.
Right? Because rinsing doesn't take everything off.
Nope.
Because there sometimes that trays up there for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Sometimes that's the first case of the day coming down at 12. So somebody forgot an instrument in the room. Somebody, like, there are a bunch of scenarios, right? That something could dry. Sometimes you have a neuro case, something is 5 hours. Sometimes you have a robot, another 5-6 hours, and that thing's been sitting there. So I would always sort I'll always clean when I sort. Now that's when I started cell processing, I was all about speed. I was all about bam. I want to do 100, 200, 150 trays, bam, trying to clean that thing out. Now at my old age, I'm a little more diligent. I make sure everything comes out so that the inspector on the prep and pack side would have less to do.
Right.
You know, I focus on that instead of numbers. So
how does that look? Like, if I have 3 sinks, right? And my first sink is the rinse sink, right? And we're supposed to brush or clean under the surface of the water. How do you do that with 50 instruments? Do you leave them all disarrayed in there while they're soaking and then try to sort it while you're brushing under there?
no,
Or are you sorting it into that last sink?
when my instruments are soaking, I already done everything. It's not
Right.
soaking the bioburden. Now I have seen people soak based on the tray. Okay, if you have an awful case where you know that certain surgeons, certain cases, it comes down bloody no matter what day of the week it is. It comes down, nothing's wiped off. Sometimes I would soak that and let it, let that enzymatic eat up that bioburden, just take it off a little bit. Then I'll rinse it off and then start sorting it. Depends on how seriously soiled that tray is. But on a regular, by the time my tray is soaking, I already sorted out all my crookers, Kellys, all that, sprayed that off, scrub the box locks, all my needle holders, all that's clean, open and close, stretch them out. And made sure everything is lined up nicely. By the time I'm soaking, I know that's it. The next time I lift it up, I'm ready for the rack. Maybe another rinse, rack, ready for the washer.
Okay, so you're doing your majority of your scrubbing, cleaning under rinsing water, not in the actual detergent.
Not in the detergent, no. Mm-mm.
No. Okay.
No,
That's
no,
that's
no.
that's interesting as well, because it's
Talk
it's
to me,
it's
talk to me.
almost like, I look at the analogy of, if I'm taking a shower,
Mhm.
am I using a just wet rag to try to clean off and then just pour soap on me and do nothing with it?
I see your point, though. I see your point. I see your point. I see your point. So you would soak it, then clean it. But then, if you have bioburden on there, what would you clean it in the sink
So
with
so
the
here's
enzymatic?
so here's how I would think.
Honestly,
Here's
yeah.
how
Go
I
ahead.
think manual cleaning goes. Manual cleaning, if that's the only process you're doing, the manual cleaning that is going to go through the window, your initial breakdown of your tray gives you your initial rinse. Your basket should soak in your enzymatic, and then your instruments placed next to your basket, separated, not sorted, so it can soak and break down that soil. Then you're grabbing your instruments and brushing in that enzymatic under the surface of the water and sorting in your last sink. The sorting should happen in the last sink for the final rinse, but all your brushing and soaking should happen in that enzymatic. That's the manual. That's the manual cleaning in my head. Manual preparation that I know it's going to either go into the ultrasonic or into the washer. I would do my initial breakdown of my tray. I rinse my tray. I sort my tray, and I soak my tray. After the soak, there's no brushing going on. There's a final rinse and then into my next process, whether that be the ultrasonic or straight into the washer, because that's the mechanical cleaning action there. I don't require a mechanical cleaning for a manual preparation, but for manual cleaning, I require some kind of friction, and that's where that brushing would come in at.
So shout out to Dante. Dante is sticking in there. So it should be the first step prior to manual, the three things. Soak, processing, the examination. You should want your box logs, instruments open, rinsing, and soaking along with your multi-part instruments should be this time. Okay. So
that's another good topic there. Disassembly of instruments.
I think you know Dante from
instruments.
somewhere. So that's interesting what you're saying. So you're saying, okay, let me break it down. Let me look at all points. So you would sometimes I do, depends on the instrument. I will scrub in a not a full sink. I will do maybe a few inches of water just to submerge, depending on how bad the trays are, or depending on my flow, right? Okay. I might do that, but if I'm seeing like things are clean, things are coming down nicely, I most times I won't scrub in an enzymatic solution. But how do you know if your M.E.C is still at the point of recommendation?
And again, it's all clean. The definition of cleaning from several sources is the removal of invisible and visible soil. Right. So even though something may look clean, it may not be clean. So, and again, and that's the differentiating between manual cleaning and manual preparation. If like, let's say all my washers broke down, or I work at a facility and I was surprised to hear that there's still facilities that don't have mechanical washers. Everything is hand washed. So if you're truly hand washing, like, and I'm going to use washing dishes as an analogy. If I have, if I lick a spoon, okay, it's not going to look dirty, right? Unless I leave like a nice little loogie behind it. But if I just do a regular lick of a spoon, it's not going to look dirty. It's going to look clean. Is it acceptable to just rinse that underwater and then put it into detergent water and just let it sit and say, okay, I can just rinse it? Was that really cleaning my spoon? Or do I put a sponge to it to remove it? Because that's the last time that's ever going to be cleaned. So depending on the soil level on there and how hard it is to remove that soil, there has to be some kind of friction. Friction's a real big part of cleaning. Soaking is just to help break down or help loosen up that soil. So when you talk about the manual cleaning process, in my opinion, there has to be friction in that soak process. It's the soaking washing sink. Washing is physical labor. So if I'm just sorting my instruments and allowing it to soak in a basin with detergent, I haven't cleaned my instruments. I just allowed it to soak. There's still going to be soil on there, regardless of the good rinse. Because remember, we're standing our instruments in the end, yeah, the box locks are open, but those instruments still touch. There's a gap in between there that there may be soil that's lingering on in there because we physically didn't remove it. So
Mm.
that cleaning action to me, and shout out to all those facilities that still have to manually clean all their trays, because I can't see myself manually cleaning properly 50, 60, 70 instruments. That is very difficult to do in soap water. It's very difficult in soap detergent. Let's put it that way. That's a hard process.
Man, so I agree. I like your way, but I like my way too.
It's okay. And again,
But
your way works. Your way
so
works as long as there's a process afterwards. And I'm not saying it's wrong, because again, to your point, how do you know that concentration's good enough to remove that soil if you're just soaking it?
yeah,
How do you know?
but
You don't know.
to me, if I
Like,
clean 3 or 4 salt instruments in, I hate what I don't hate, but I dislike salt instruments in enzymatic solution because I know that's bringing down my MEC as we started. That's bringing down my MEC. As soon as you have a salt tray in there, boom, you're losing concentration right there because it's fighting the bioburden right now. And when I
right,
take that tray out, I'm gonna lose some moisture out that sink. And what do I have left? I'm taking some enzymatic with me, so that will the next tray get it? Plus, I have floaters in my sink at that point. So what
right,
do I
right.
do? Do I drain it? Do I scoop the floaters out? Like I don't like seeing any bioburden. That's why I clean first, clean scrub. It may be in a little bit of enzymatic, depends. Um, it depends on how soiled it is and how busy my sinks are. I might, scrub some of that on, but that sink I'm draining it more often than my main soaking sink. So that's one of my reasons too for not doing that because I don't want to be
Oh, so you're saying you're
draining 10
rinsing.
gallons. Huh?
So you're saying your initial rinse sink, you have water in there, huh?
I
You
have a
already
little
filled
bit
that.
of water in there. I have a little
Oh,
bit of
really?
water in
Yeah,
there.
I do. Yeah, see, I don't do that. I do a free rinse because again, I don't want to see the floaties. So I do a free rinse. I don't. That first sink is free, either free flowing water from the
Mhm.
sink from the spigot or
Right.
a shower head type rinse. I'd never fill up and do like a soap type rinse.
Mine may have about 2 inches of water in it at times. Maybe just
Okay.
2 inches. Because another thing I don't like the spray arms splashing from the stainless steel sink. So I don't like too many plants. That's why I leave a little bit of water there to absorb when I am spraying in there. Because you get so much splashing coming up, all those aerosols. So that's
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
the too. So
Makes sense. Makes
yeah,
sense though. Makes sense. Yeah.
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 I try, but then we definitely have to continue this conversation. Now I'm gonna do some reading up. So next time we talk, I'm definitely gonna come back with some information. But is there a
Yeah.
wrong or right way?
And again, that's where we in still processing have to like really. I think we have a lot of things that we need to tighten up in order to truly standardize practices. Is like, is there a wrong way? I mean, there, you always hear the term. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but it's that formula has to stay the same. And as Dante's pointing out, it's rinse, soak, rinse. It's not soak, rinse, rinse. It shouldn't be. You don't want to fill that sink up with gross soil. You're gonna diminish your concentration level automatically. That bioburden is going to eat up that detergent or that high level disinfectant. That's why when you do high level disinfections, it tells you right off the bat you can't have any organics in there because it's going to be ineffective. You don't clean. I mean, you don't go into, before you wash your hands and they're muddy. Let's say you were building a pot and you're playing with clay. You don't try to put soap on clayed up hands and try to wash them. You rinse all that gross soil off first, and then you put soap and wash it off. And that's the practice that should go across with all cleaning practices. Remove the gross soil with your rinse it's for the appearance of clean. And then you use your detergent to further loosen up those soils that you can't see.
Hmm. Man, I'm still up in the air. I'm still up in the air with that last Dante. You're not convincing me there. You're not convincing me there, brother. So
What
I
was
like
that?
the
What was that
final
last? What was that
rinse.
last? What was that last sentence? What was that? I didn't catch that one.
What Dante said that. I like that final rinse to be, and
Oh,
my
no, yeah,
final
I can't.
soak
I'm not
to
gonna agree
be.
with him on that one either.
I like my final soak to be enzymatic. Like it gonna chill there. So like okay, some IFUs say soak for 2 to 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. So I want that soak to be on a quote unquote clean instrument. You know what I
Correct.
mean? I want it touching all surfaces. I don't want any barrier, like any barrier in terms of bio burden in between my enzymatic and my instrument. That's why I make it my final soak to this. I don't know. I'm thinking I'm gonna read up because my opinion isn't wood is wood and bond. So I want to make sure I read, see if there's any variation in it. So
Yeah, it's. I think even with any process, like even when you're doing, again, our process here in the United States is we do a manual clean or a manual preparation with all our instruments prior to any mechanical cleaning. But between all those steps, there should be a rinse between many of the ultrasonics that that have the still baths tell you after ultrasonics you have to do a rinse afterwards. You got to
mhm.
get rid of that residual detergent on there because that detergent can factor into the next phase. Now, I've debated this before with several individuals, and the vendors that I've spoken to um, let me know that if you have residual enzymatic, like if you're doing a manual cleaning and you don't have that final rinse and you have residual enzymatic on that instrumentation, yes, the first cycle of most washers is a pre-treated water cycle. So you're having a pre-rinse on there. But if remember when we're rinsing enzymatics or any detergent, it forms bubbles. So that water, when it goes down that sink, may trip one of the sensors that doesn't allow the washer to dose out the proper chemistry coming out because it's already determined that there's chemistry in there or that there was a proper rinse in there. So it can interfere with the cycle parameters. That's why that rinse is important prior to going into the mechanical washer.
Yeah, definitely because I've seen some washers shut off because of that.
Yep.
But,
Yep. Because you'll have some foaming going in there. Because again, what you use at the sink is not what you're using inside of the washers. Usually it's not the same chemistry. It can be different chemistries. So you have to make sure that you change that.
definitely, guys, definitely. And Jesse Lopez,
Yes, sir.
you have anything you want to share? Oh yeah, first of all, I want to thank my sponsors, calzero.com and Sterile Education. Guys, go to your app store, check out Sterile Education. They have an interesting app with all your favorite podcasts on there. Check out Sterile Education. All right, don't forget, guys. Do not forget Sterile Education. And one little thing.
Yes,
Go
sir.
to go get on your YouTube, guys. Check out the process. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And guys, use your pinky finger, hit that notification bell so that you will be notified every time we have new content coming out. Like tonight, you would have known if you're watching this, not if you're not watching this live, you would have known Jesse Lopez and myself would be on talking about MEC. All right, guys. So hit that notification bell so every time we come on, you get those notifications. All right. So Jesse, where can the folks find you?
I am on Instagram under WUYB. Okay. I'm in on LinkedIn under Jesse Lopez, and you can also find me on YouTube under WDYD. What do you do as a central store processor? So check it out. I have tons of educational videos, controversial videos, talking about our industry, our likes, our dislikes, and our challenges. So check me out. Stir that pot.
Stir that pot. Shout out to my co-host Alessandra. Um, Big shout out to her. She's feeling well and she'll be back on the show soon. So guys, and just trying to do a couple little cleanups there. Shout out to my sponsors again. Shout out to the Condre Institute. Guys, please, come out, watch the shows. Thank you for supporting. Thank you, Dante. Let me give a little shout out to those folks tuning in. Thank you to Marla. Appreciate your support. And my Facebook guest also. I couldn't see your names, guys, but thank you for chiming in. Appreciate it. And guys, thank you, and we'll see you in the next one. Yes, no, for
Yes,
sure.
sir. Yes,
And
sir.
Jesse, keep putting those videos out because I might get furious when I see them, but it's good info.
Definitely.
It's good
Definitely.
information. I'm like, dang. I don't want to talk about this, but I'm like, you know what? That's some good. That's some good information. You know what I mean? Because nobody's talking about it anyway. So
That's
keep up the
right.
good work, brother, and
Thank
looking
you.
for
Thank you.
bigger and better things for you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, brother. Peace.
Peace.
Don't go anywhere, Jesse. All
I'm
right.
here. Right.